Kim?
Hi, Katherine.
Hello.
So I had a consult with you recently about my tritype, and that led me to realize that my understanding of certain Enneagram types was flawed. Like, I don't think I understand 4s or 5s or 9s because I previously thought that I was getting all these 4, 5, 9s, but then you're telling me that you suspect that of clients that I'm getting are really 6s and 9s. And so immediately I started testing everyone who was coming on board. And I noticed that the clients whose MBTI begin with ES, extroverted sensing, when they take your test, they seem, it seems accurate. But when I give it to my other clients who are introverted intuitives, like INFJ, INFP, INTJ, when they take your test, they're getting results that I don't agree with. Like when they get this, like for example, I recently referred a client to you, and for the past, 3 or 4, at least 4 years, she had been taking this tri-type test, and I don't know if it's yours or someone else's, but she told me she kept getting 3, 5, 8, which is what I kept getting all these years. And then when I spoke with you and I mentioned to her that I got a 3, 6, 8, then she took it right away. And within an hour, she said she got a 3, 6, 8. And we were chatting. I was in a small group chatting with some other clients, and I was talking about something else. But within less than 40 minutes, I mean, your test is pretty long and it requires focus. So I don't know how she quickly took the test and then suddenly no, because when I took your test, I take it with deliberation. I actually focus and read it, and it takes me a while. I don't try to skip through and breeze through it. I take it with intent, deliberation. But I was chatting with her and another client asking for like if they could send me some Japanese cosmetics or something to ship it from their country. And anyway, while we were chatting about that, she went and took your test and said she got a 3, 6, 8. And I was shocked because it felt like she was tracking me, like she was answering the test based on what she thought I would answer it as. You know, I knew she couldn't be my type because I don't think someone who is my type would get coaching from me. You know what I'm saying? Like, what could my type learn from me? You know what I'm saying?
A lot, if they're the same. But here's the question. Was she trying to match you when you said you were the 3, 5, 8? Or when you said you were the 3, 6, 8? And she might be altogether different. So what is important is, are we defining the types in the same way?
So I thought it was weird that she kept getting, like when I was getting 3, 5, 8 years ago, up until the point that I met you, she got that. But then as soon as I notified her that I was a 3, 6, 8, then she went and took it. And I don't know why she felt the need to go take it again. But then when she took it, she matched my result. But anyway, so she was supposed to get coaching on me for this particular other case, this other person. But then I told her, you know, to go ahead and maybe book with you and get typed by you, because I'm not an expert on, I mean, I've been giving out your test. I've been giving out another test, and I just kind of been eyeballing it using another test, but I was not using your test. And she went and took the test, and she kept saying to me that she got 3, 5, 8. But then after she booked with you, she said you typed her as a 3, 6, 9, which is a totally different type. And I'm even skeptical of a 3. I mean, I believe she has a 6, 9. And I believe you when you tell me that you suspect that all of my girls have a
I don't think all. I never do all.
Okay.
So it was your description of the types. And I said that's usually a 6 or 9.
Right. So I believe that, let's say this particular group has a 6 plus 9, but she said you typed her as a 3, 6, 9, and I asked her, well, what's your main core type? And she said 3. And I just don't see the 3 because to me, she's so withdrawn. I don't see any, like I consider, like I have another client who's an ESTJ369 and I believe it. I see the 3, like it's just, but anyway, I'm just mentioning this to you because my gut is tracking inconsistencies and it bothers me when I see.
And that's 6, by the way, rather than 8.
Really?
That's usually lead 6. Yeah, because it's really important to the 6 to figure out what those inconsistencies are. Whereas the 8 just thinks, yeah, that's an inconsistency and there's no additional attention going to it.
But this problem is I'm trying to figure, are these girls lying to themselves? Because if I'm giving out your test to everyone and they're taking it, do I accept it? Because when certain clients take it, and another one took it too, the one who you said she might be a 926, she got 369. So
from me or from the test?
From the test.
The test isn't enough. It needs to be checked. And that's why I said you need to look at what was in the blue banner and look at how they made their decisions in the Enneaspread part. Because you'll begin to recognize what's incongruent. And then you must look at the adjectives they chose.
Yes. So maybe I need to get with you and learn how to.
So what is your question then?
My question is, I don't know what to do when so I believe your test has merit, but then I have clients who are taking your test and I don't believe their results. I don't believe the input that they're giving me. So I'm skeptical of their results. So when these two clients, there's 2 of them, there's the INTJ and there's the INFP, and both INFP and INFJ are coming out with 369 with lead 3. I'm like, no, my body is saying, you're not a 3. You're not. I mean, I believe they're a 6/9, but not a 3, and not in anyway. So I don't want to accuse my clients of lying and say they're lying to themselves.
Well, they might not be aware of it either, because these are identifications. And when people identify with something, it's very hard to have them see another perspective, unless you can ask the question that determines if it's coming from the head, heart, or gut. That helps a lot. And then the lookalikes. But it's not whether a test is right or wrong, because my first Enneacard tests, I just used 5 adjectives and only 1 set of cards, actually, and then a second set for the tritype. But now I use 3, and they're having to do a lot more organizing. So I've had people say, oh, your first test was right. I came out as a 5. And now I'm skeptical of your new test, and it's wrong. But to even use the word skeptical is what 6s use. So you have to listen to the vocabulary, like I'm listening to yours, as you're saying. Now, the ESTJ is really strong, as I mentioned earlier. So it can make it harder to determine. But what is causing you stress is whether you can believe them or not, whether you can trust them or the test, or whether they're lying or not. And these are the concerns of type 6.
So I'm certain that they're not what they say the test, what they're inputting in the test. And I believe they're picking what they perceive.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, that's what we all do.
So that's why I'm having a difficult time, like trying to reconcile my person, because I know my clients, I know them very well, and I'm listening to them and I'm connected to them. And it's like they have a fantasy persona of what they think they are. Like they think they're a 3, and I'm like, you're not a 3. Like, and it's not that I'm skeptical, I'm certain they're not a 3. I'm certain they're not.
But if your definition of 3 is the self-promoting, assertive 3, that's goal, 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 you're going to miss the anti-vanity 3 that is like downplaying that, but they're weaving in their significance. Because remember, 369 is the most common, so there are a lot more threes out there than people realize. But if they're the sexual three, they're going to become the ideal person. And if they've decided that you're the ideal because you're the coach, they're going to try and match you exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're a 6 and they feel safer if you're the same, they're going to match you, or they're going to think you're like them. Like every time Spencer's brother came home and he met someone new, he'd say, "Hey, Mom, I've met someone just like me. They're a 6 the way I am." But actually, they could be any Enneagram type. But he was seeing what was similar. And that's what a lot of 6s can do. And then 9s merge with the person of their choice. And then they only counter merge in a conflict. And then the person saying, "Wait a minute, we matched. We're not matching now." But what I'm hearing you say is that you want to be able to trust them or the test,
Yes.
or your evaluation.
Yes. So there's your test, there's what their perception, and then there's my perception. So we've got 3 different things going on, and it's just all over the place. Like I have my own perception of them, they have their own perception, and then there's your test, you know, and we each, me and my client, we have our own interpretation of your test. So it's all about interpretation. And there's this dissonance, and I'm not okay with all this dissonance. You know, like even I'm not fully well versed in your material, so I need to, you know, get more
Right.
That's the
training
best way to go,
on that.
is
you
to know how to interpret the test or what
Right.
questions to ask.
Right.
Spence?
Yeah, I would say combine all 3. As someone who has 8 and 6, I also have a tendency to not only question, but challenge. And so it's one of those things to remember. And trust me, as someone who also leads with 8, can I say, if I feel it in my gut that blah, 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 I'm going to push that. I'm not always right. I don't know your inner world. I don't know what's motivating you. I'm only going off of what you've said and how I've internalized your behaviors and your mannerisms. So the thing to really understand is if you're seeing a cog in the wheel, all right, I'm seeing 2 out of 3 of these numbers, but this one doesn't make sense to me. Just ask trap questions, right? Ask questions that would separate one number from another. Both 2s and 3s and 4s want affirmations, but in what area? They're all focused on image, but what kind of image do they want? So like, oh, okay, so when it comes to like, if you're at a job and blah, 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 like what would it matter? What would really mean a lot to you if the boss pointed this out to you? Right? Because there's all an image they're trying to live up to. There's all a feedback they're trying to get them to either prove your perceptions correct or to give you more information you didn't have previously.
Yeah.
Because my guess is the truth is somewhere in the middle. You're picking up on blah, blah, blah. And remember, behaviors, those are the snake in the grass. We have no idea why someone's behaving a certain way.
So it's
So
not
we have to be like, what's your inner world that's driving this behavior? And not to mention, if we see our own type in someone else and we don't recognize it, we call out falsehood when we have 8 and 6. And what I've heard you refer to over and over and over again is they're not a 3. They're not a 3. They're not a 3.
They're
That's
not a
number-
this or they're not a that.
But I've heard 3 specifically, and 3's in your tri-type. So if you don't connect to that type of 3, which 3s will show up differently based on what the other 2 numbers are, just like any of the other 8 numbers.
MBTI.
Right, and that too. So my guess is it's also like that doesn't feel right, because remember the 8 and 6, that combination is very much like I'm going to question that and also directly challenge it. That's what that combo does.
yes,
The truth comes out when you do that.
Yeah.
It's the
But put 3 with a
perception.
different number, 3 looks different. So
I'm very confrontational, but I try to like not be so like
ask trap questions. I would really recommend that. And if you're curious on how to get these
Questions of discernment, not trap.
Sure.
Well, they are trap questions,
Yeah.
but they reveal people have to use their own vocabulary. And
basically try not to lead the witness, because I've been guilty of that when I was first learning how to do this. So instead of leading the witness and guiding them towards where you think, be like, okay, ask a vague question that would identify one of the three.
Okay, so are you saying, when you say trap question, is it yes or no, or is it
No,
open-ended?
open-ended.
Never
Open-ended.
yes or no.
Never yes or no. Because
So
that's a leading question
Okay, so
accidentally.
don't give her a choice, no choice, just
You make him give a paragraph. That's
Yeah.
why I said if you did well at work, what would you want your boss to reflect back to you, for example?
okay.
Right? Boss is usually someone who we want to live up to an expectation that's going to hit all three image types. But what are they going to point out? Are they going to want that the boss recognized they not only got the job done, but they did it in this like unique way? But is it more like, hey, like I love your efficiency and that you're so on top of it, and I can always depend on you to be the example, blah, 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 3. You're so helpful and the way that you like build up others and like blah, 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 2. Like, what do they want to be recognized for? Right. And that's just heart types, right? You know, like I would say, how do you handle your anger if it's a gut type? How do you deal with anxiety and what's your thinking process if it's a head type? So whatever center you're trying to discern, as my mom would say, I was using trap, I think discern's a better word. Help, like get them to help you, because maybe you don't know all the info, or maybe they're wrong. It happens all the time.
So instead of relying solely on the test results, I did buy your mom's Ennea style book where you're learning the lexicon. So I just want to hear the way they describe themselves, what words they use, adjectives, their language.
And the way they fill out the questionnaire, because
Yes.
we think of ourselves many different ways, but what are we going to put as those 5 words? Like I'll later say, well, yeah, I'm like that. And other people will say that, which is why it's the one place on the test until that part was broken where you couldn't go backwards. Because once you filled out the Ennea style questions, they're open-ended. Then it goes on to the Ennea cards. And what would happen invariably is people would say, oh, wait, that word on that card is more what I am. And they'd want to go back and change the adjective. But what's critical is what they say first. And
I looked at that first. To me, that was the most valuable part of the test, was the Ennea style questions, how they describe themselves in their own words. That was the most valuable to me.
But here's a really important piece to that, is that they'll be using adjectives that only an adult uses. And the question is, what was true of you most of your life, most of the time? So when you see those 5 adjectives, you need their definition. And if it's really kind of advanced vocabulary, you ask them, well, what word would you have used when you were 10 years old? And then they're going to have to reveal another part of themselves. And they might say, oh, well, I used to be really cautious, but I'm not now. And usually with a 6, they go through puberty and they're less cautious and they're more confident. But until you ask them what like if they say they're brave, well, the type that says brave has 6 in the tritype. It doesn't have to be the lead, but 6 is in there. So when you go to the page in Ennea style that has just the chart as the most common words used by each type, you look at that first, and then you can go to the individual page to see if they used more of those words. But they were based, I think the last time that was changed was after about 1,000 people. And what I found is they were just variations on theme, but the choices were the same, maybe a little more finesse, but look at all the words on the Ennea style questionnaire. So in answer to your dilemma, is you need to know more about their definition of the words and make sure it's not your definition of the word. And then do the inquiry process where you're saying, okay, after they give you their definition, then say, now just blurt and see. And if they said they were kind, then you say, all right, and what would happen if you're not kind? And they might say, oh, well, I'm never not kind. Well, go to the crazy idea and imagine that you were kind, were unkind. And then they'll say something, and whatever they say, well, then I wouldn't be a nice person. And if you're not a nice person, then they might say, well, then I wouldn't be liked. And if you're not liked, don't let them go into explanation at that point. They got to define their adjective from the very beginning, their definition of kind, a kind person. But then you keep going until they get to, well, then I'd be dead. And if you're dead, you keep going. Because for some people, if they're dead, they have a fear of not being remembered. Other people, if they're dead, well, they'd be sad. And even though they know, well, I know I'd be dead, but I'd be sad, or I didn't fulfill my purpose. People go different places, and you need to keep going until they say the same thing 3 times.
I noticed there's a lot of 6s and 8s here, and you kept saying while we were talking that both of you kept saying that I'm a 6, and I'm wondering if I'm really a counterphobic 6.
Yeah.
More than
With 8 in the tri-type.
Yeah.
Well,
And ESTJ. The 863 is the most single-minded, assertive person on the Enneagram. And then ESTJ just amplifies that. By far and away, everyone would think you're an 8, but you're not using the 8 vocabulary, which means you're not using the defense strategy of 8. In other words, 8 wouldn't ask a question about whether the test is right, or their sensing is right, or if the person's lying to them. Those are the fears of the 6. But the counterphobic 6 is going to go right into action, but it's defensive. It's preemptively having the defense in case what you're projecting onto that person is correct. So if you think they're lying, then you're going to want to prove it. And if
I don't think they're intentionally lying, but I'm seeing an inconsistency. I don't trust.
yeah, these are all the issues of 6.
There's no blind trust.
Well, that doesn't exist in 6.
I have to check. I'm checking. I'm checking and I'm tracking right now with these types of girls that I'm dealing with. And I'm only this way with them. I'm not this way with anybody else. It's just because they're my clients and they're having it. So anyway, I'm this way with them and only with them. It's heightened with this type.
But if an 8, well, an 8 wouldn't ask that question, to be honest with you, because an 8's going to believe their sense of things. They're not going to ever give power to a test. They're going to trust instead their sense, but they may want to go learn more about how to accurately evaluate something. But it's not the concern of the 8, because the 8 is in denial of their own lack of trust, or they expect everybody to be lying, whether they mean to or not. So they're just going to want to see, okay, what kind of lie is it? Are they aware, or are they trying to match me, or why? They're going to go into the details of it. But the 6 is going to keep repeating the same thing because it's very distressing on an unconscious level for 6 to not have the answer and know what to trust, who to trust, when to trust, and what the criteria is for trust. Because if you trust someone and you should have been skeptical, then you could be taken advantage of, lied to, manipulated, or fail in your relationship with them. And underneath it all, with 3 in the tri-type, you're going to want to succeed, and quickly, because both your tri-type and your MBTI type want to do it fast. And people love that are indecisive. If they have 9 or 6 in the tri-type, they're going to love having a coach that's confident.
Well, I rely on my own authority. I don't rely on them. I don't rely on them to even know what to ask me, because I already know these girls, they're so clueless that they don't even know what they need. They just know they need to talk to me, and I get to decide what they need. You know what I'm saying? So I don't even put, it's not that I don't trust
Oh,
your,
I think I know what you're saying, but no, because if we're not in the person's shoes, we can only guesstimate what they're saying.
Mm,
But interestingly enough, again, the sixes say, you know what I mean, you know what I'm saying. But it's usually a head type that does that, not a gut type,
mhm.
because it's too visceral if you lead with the gut. But if you lead with a head type, you're going to think people have the same understanding that you do, because it's a head concept. And remember, the head type is focused on what do I need to learn or know to be safe in the world, and who can teach me. Whereas the 5 as the head type is saying, yeah, what do I need to know? And let me go try a bunch of different things out on my own till I see, okay, I need to learn to fish. How am I going to catch a fish? And they're going to just try many, many different strategies till they find the one that works. Whereas the 7 is saying, wait, this guy knows how to fish. And they'll kind of invite themselves along. Hey, let's go fishing together. I'm sure we can give each other some tips or have a good time fishing. But it's a ploy for the 7 to learn what they want to learn without being one down from other people. And the 6 is saying, well, wait, does this person know more? Is this more important or that more important? So it's needing to see who has the best information, what is the best test. Now, some people give more than one test if they're a coach in any field. I'm just saying you need to give mine first so that they're not influenced by any of the words that other tests will reveal. And a lot of times when I'm working one-on-one with someone and I'm asking them to define one of their adjectives, they can't really do it. And they'll say, well, I don't really know. And I said, well, what made you decide to choose this word? Oh, my son said that. Or, gee, I asked my friend and they said this. Or I asked my husband and they said that. And that's immediately a 6 or a 9, because you're looking outside yourself for someone to tell you what's inside yourself.
A 6 or 9?
Yep. And remember that information was not fully disseminated. So the strong ESTJ 6 was left out of the dissemination of the Enneagram. And you would have been made an 8. I would have made you an 8 38 years ago. It's only learning the full definition of the types that I altered. But then I would have wondered why the person was doubting or questioning or skeptical, because as an 8, I never questioned that. So now Spencer has 6 as his head type, so he's going to doubt more than I am. And it's a good means to an end. And 863 and 864 are the 2 most intense tritypes in any order. So yeah, I would explore that your questioning isn't just your ESTJ, but it's the 6 wanting to get the right information.
Yeah, and I don't want to take up any more time, but maybe I'll book a session with you to compare the difference between a counterphobic 6 with a 3 versus an 8.
Absolutely. That's very helpful.
But I'll just take that privately with you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Great questions, though.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
That's
thank you so
fantastic.
much for sharing that, because it's very hard to see the counterphobic 6 if you're an ESTJ. Very hard.
You said it was more 8 than an 8, I think.
Exactly. Both the 648 and the 638. In fact, the definition of 8 matches the 368 tritype
Mhm.
more than the 258 or the 852.
Mhm.
Even more, because it's so definite.
Mhm.
And that's why I include MBTI with everything that I do.